There's a quiet moment that hurts more than an argument. It's when someone in your own home talks to you as if you no longer matter, as if your words are a nuisance or your decisions are just a whim. You feel it in your body before you understand it in your mind. In a look that lingers a little too long, in a comment made in front of other people, in that small gesture that makes you wonder if you've become invisible without realizing it. When did this happen? When did you stop being the reference point and start being merely tolerated? I've seen many men and women your age carry that discomfort without saying a word. They tell themselves it's not worth arguing, that it's better to stay quiet for the grandkids, that they're too old for conflict. I told myself the same thing for a while. And meanwhile, something starts to shrink inside. It's not wounded pride. It's dignity pushed out of place. The question isn't whether you love your family. The question is what kind of treatment you're allowing in the name of that love. My name is Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. I'm not here to lecture you or hand you quick fixes. What I'm about to share are 7 clear moves, grounded in the philosophy of the ancient Stoics, that help me reclaim my place without yelling, without forcing anything, and without breaking ties. Not so they fear you. So they respect you. And maybe as you listen, you'll start to notice something uncomfortable but necessary. You still have more room to move than you thought. 1. Define who's in charge in your home, even if you're no longer the traditional head of the family. There's a quiet confusion that shows up with age, and almost nobody names it. We confuse losing strength with losing judgment. We confuse not raising our voice with having no authority. And little by little, without any explicit conversation, the house starts to function as if the older adult is a permanent guest. You still pay for things, you still keep routines going, you're still available, but it's no longer clear from what position you're speaking. And when that isn't defined, someone else fills the space by inertia, not out of cruelty, but because the spot was left empty. I saw it at my own table. Schedules that were no longer mine. Decisions made without asking me. Comments tossed out casually, always in the same tone. Nobody yelled. Nobody insulted me. But something was off. I realized it one night late, when I turned off the lights and wondered whether it was still my home or just the place where I slept. It wasn't a dramatic question. It was a practical one. Where am I standing from? Defining who's in charge doesn't mean ruling the way you did when the kids were small. That season is over, but there's another kind of authority that doesn't expire unless you abandon it. It's the authority of an adult with judgment, history, values, and clear limits. You're not competing with youth or energy or new ideas. You hold the frame, and when the frame isn't clear, everything else gets messy. Have you noticed how the way they treat you changes when you yourself seem unsure of your place? Here's the part that's hard to accept. Nobody is going to hand you your authority back out of gratitude. That's not how it works. Authority is embodied. It shows up in how you speak, what you allow, what you don't argue about, what you treat as a given. Marcus Aurelius understood this well when he spoke about governing yourself before trying to govern others. In old age, the governance is no longer external. It's positional. It's taking your place without asking permission. A common scene: you're at home. Someone comes in, comments on how you do things, changes something without telling you. You feel the irritation, but you smile. You tell yourself it's not worth it. That small, silent gesture adds up. And over time, that silence gets interpreted as consent. The tool here is simple, but uncomfortable. Calmly naming your position, not in an argument, not as a reproach. One clear sentence said once at the right moment: "This is my home. I decide this here." No long explanations, no justification. It's not about commanding people, it's about governing the space. The person who doesn't govern their home ends up adapting to it as if it doesn't belong to them. And when that happens, respect erodes without noise. There's a line that stayed with me for a long time, and I didn't understand it when I was young. Tolerated disorder becomes the norm, and once the norm is installed, removing it costs more than speaking up in time. Maybe you feel resistance just hearing this. Maybe you think it'll create tension. It will. But it's a different kind of tension. It's not conflict. It's a reset. And no reset feels comfortable at first. The question isn't whether others are ready to see you take your place. The question is whether you're willing to do it without backing down when the atmosphere gets weird. Because from here, something starts to change, and not always in the way you expect. 2. Separate love from the treatment you allow. There's a very common emotional trap at this stage of life, and almost all of us fall into it at some point. Confusing love with total tolerance. Thinking that because someone is your child, or your daughter's partner, or the mother of your grandkids, you have to accept any tone, any comment, any intrusion, as if the bond cancels your right to be treated with respect. And that's where a quiet kind of wear begins. From the outside you can't see it, but inside it makes noise every single day. I caught myself making excuses in my head. He's my son. He doesn't mean it. He's young. He'll learn. I don't want problems because of the kids. They sound reasonable, but deep down, they only postpone a discomfort that keeps growing. Because the problem isn't one isolated comment. The problem is the pattern, and when you justify the pattern, the other person normalizes it. Loving someone doesn't mean allowing everything, and setting boundaries isn't withdrawing affection. That distinction is hard, because nobody wants to feel harsh with their own blood. But here's an uncomfortable question worth asking slowly. Does the love you feel for them include love for yourself too? Or are you always leaving yourself for last? If every time someone speaks to you badly, you stay quiet to preserve harmony, what harmony are you protecting exactly? I remember an ordinary afternoon, no shouting, no drama, a conversation in the kitchen, a dismissive comment said with irony in front of others. Nothing serious, anyone might say. I felt that heat in my chest that shows up when something crosses a line. I didn't say anything in the moment, but later I understood that silence was read as permission. It wasn't cruelty, it was interpretation. What you allow becomes what's normal. Seneca warned that whoever doesn't know what they should tolerate ends up tolerating everything. He didn't say that to make us rigid, but to keep us from dissolving. Respect isn't demanded with threats. It's established with clarity. And that clarity starts inside you when you decide that affection doesn't justify being disregarded, not today and not tomorrow. Here's a concrete tool that changes a lot. Separate in your mind 2 levels, the bond and the treatment. The bond can be deep, even unconditional. The treatment cannot. Treatment is regulated, corrected, named. And when something crosses the line, you don't need a speech. It's enough to say privately and calmly, "Don't speak to me like that." It's not a negotiation. It's a signal. Some people will be surprised. Some will get defensive. Someone may even accuse you of being sensitive or different. That's part of the adjustment. But something starts to settle when you stop confusing love with endurance. Because respect doesn't break healthy bonds, it redefines them. And once that redefinition begins, a new tension appears, one many people don't know how to handle at first. That's where it gets interesting, and it's also where many people back down too soon. 3. Correct adults in private and teach children through example. There's a frequent mistake that comes from exhaustion, not bad intentions. Always staying quiet to avoid scenes. Or on the other extreme, exploding right in front of the people who should be exposed the least. With time, you learn that neither of those puts anything in order. Neither accumulated silence nor a public blow-up builds respect. It only changes the mood for a moment, and then everything returns to the old place, or worse. When it comes to adult children or the partners who join the family, correction isn't a teaching moment anymore. You're not raising them. You're setting a frame. And frames aren't drawn in public. They're drawn in private, with measured words, no sarcasm, and no audience watching. Not to protect the other person, but to protect the relationship from an unnecessary humiliation that later gets paid back with distance or resentment. I remember a clear moment, a comment out of line in front of my grandkids, an uncomfortable laugh, everyone staring at the floor. I felt the temptation to answer right there, to set the boundary in front of everyone so it was crystal clear. I didn't. I slept badly that night. The next day I asked to speak one-on-one. Few words, a serious tone, no old grievances, just the boundary. It was uncomfortable, but it was clean. And it created a difference a public correction never would have achieved. With children, it's different. They don't listen to speeches, they watch behavior. If they see you allow people to undermine you, they learn they can do it too. If they see you stay calm, keep order, and stay consistent even when others don't, they absorb that pattern without you having to say a thing. The respect you don't give yourself in front of them, they won't give you later. Have you ever asked what they're learning when they watch you swallow what hurts? Epictetus said we're not affected by things themselves, but by the judgments we make about them. In old age, that judgment becomes a living example. You don't correct with punishments anymore. You correct with presence, with visible consequences, with coherence. If something doesn't sit right with you, you act accordingly. If something crosses the line, you name it in the right space. No theater, no applause. Something practical that often works better than expected. A simple rule. Adults are corrected privately, in a brief, direct conversation. Children are guided through repeated, predictable actions. You don't need long explanations. You need consistency. The one who stays quiet today and explodes tomorrow loses authority. The one who acts the same way every time, even when it's awkward, builds respect over the long run. There will be odd looks. There will be silence afterward. There may even be distance for a while. That doesn't mean you were wrong. It means the system is adjusting. And adjustments always create tension. The question is whether you'll hold that order when nobody congratulates you for it. Because what comes next tests something deeper. Your ability to stop over-explaining once you've already been clear. 4. Stop arguing about decisions you don't owe anyone an explanation for. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that shows up when you start justifying the way you live inside your own home. It doesn't happen all at once. It starts with small explanations nobody asked for. Why you get up early, why you need quiet, why you keep things arranged a certain way. And without realizing it, you're no longer deciding. You're defending yourself. And when you defend yourself too much, something becomes clear to the other person. You feel like you're in a smaller position. I fell into that longer than I like to admit. I explained schedules, moods, basic needs, as if they were the odd habits of an old person instead of valid decisions made by an adult who knows what they need to stay at peace. I did it to avoid friction, to keep everything flowing. But I was creating the opposite. Every explanation opened a new debate. Every justification left a crack for someone else to weigh in, correct, or dismiss. Here's an uncomfortable truth. When you over-explain, you invite people to evaluate you. And once they're evaluating you, respect shifts. Not because they're malicious, but because the role got poorly defined. In your home, some decisions are not up for debate, not because you're authoritarian, but because they're yours. Since when does an adult need permission to organize their own space? I remember a simple scene, a remark about why I was going to bed early, a joke dressed up as concern. Before, I would have explained the fatigue, the age, the long day. That time I didn't. I said it was my schedule, that's all. The silence that followed was awkward, but it was also revealing. There was no comeback, because there was no argument to use against me. The boundary wasn't in what I said, it was in what I stopped explaining. The Stoics understood this point well. Not everything deserves an answer. Not everything deserves a defense. There's a quiet dignity in acting without giving an account of what isn't negotiable. It's not coldness. It's emotional economy, saving your energy for what matters and letting certain discomforts do their job without rescuing them. The tool here is clear, even if it isn't always easy. Decide ahead of time what you will no longer explain. Your schedule, your routines, your need for order or silence. When the comment comes, answer once, calmly, without adding layers, and then hold the silence. Don't fill it, don't soften it. A well-placed silence puts more in order than any speech. At first they may see you as distant or changed. That line may come out, the one that hurts more than it seems. You're not the same anymore. Maybe that's true. Maybe for the first time, you're stopping yourself from asking permission to be who you are. And that makes people uncomfortable, because when you reposition yourself, you force everyone else to reposition too. And not everyone is ready for that move. That's where something even more concrete gets tested: the access you give to your home and your time. 5. Adjust access to your home based on the respect you receive. There's an idea that's hard to accept when you age with firm values, thinking that closing the door a little is the same as punishment or resentment. It isn't. It's order. For years, you kept your house open without conditions, with the logic of family unity, the long table, constant availability. But seasons change, and when respect starts to fail, offering the same access isn't generosity, it's emotional disorder. It took me a while to understand. I thought regulating visits, time, or overnight stays was a polite way of pulling away. I told myself I didn't want to become that older person who puts up barriers. Until I noticed something very concrete. The disrespect always happened in the same setting. Long visits, open-ended stays, that feeling that anything was allowed because the door was always open. That's when I realized the problem wasn't the people. It was the frame. Your home isn't just a physical space. It's your mental refuge. It's where you rest from the world. And when that refugee becomes a place of tension, something breaks inside. Adjusting access doesn't mean throwing anyone out. It means organizing the living arrangement. Deciding how long, how often, and under what conditions you share your space. Have you ever asked yourself why you tolerate in your own home things you wouldn't tolerate anywhere else? I remember a small change that created a big effect: setting time limits, cutting down on drop-ins, asking for notice, nothing dramatic, nothing over-explained, just new practical rules. At first there was surprise, some discomfort, even some wrong interpretations, but over time, the tone changed. Not because I said something different, but because access was no longer automatic. This isn't revenge. It isn't control. It's consequence. The Stoics spoke often about living according to the nature of things, and a relationship where respect fails can't keep operating as if nothing is happening. Adjusting access is a mature way of saying, this is how it works now. No reproaches, no drama, quiet firmness. The tool here is concrete, and you can apply it today. Observe where the disrespect repeats itself. Connect it to the context. Then change the context. Less shared time, more structure, more predictability. Respect often shows up when closeness stops being guaranteed and starts being cared for. Some will read it as distance. Some will feel uneasy with the new normal. That's part of the process. The mistake would be backing down out of guilt. Because when you regulate access, you're not only putting others in order, you're putting yourself in order. And that order prepares you for something even more challenging: staying centered when, despite everything, someone tries to provoke you or discredit you. That's where what you've really learned gets tested. 6. Reclaim your center when someone provokes or dismisses you. There's a moment when everything above gets truly tested. Not when things are calm, but when someone knows exactly what to say to knock you off balance. Adult children know. Their partners do too. They don't always do it with bad intentions, but they know your weak spots. A bit of sarcasm, a comment about your age, a hint that you're overreacting. And then the old automatic reaction appears. Explain yourself, defend yourself, justify yourself, or respond from wounded pride. It took me years to see this pattern in myself. I thought I reacted because I was right, but really I reacted because they touched something that hurt. And every time I entered that game, I lost something more important than the argument. I lost my center. And when an older adult loses their center in front of family, respect dissolves, even if they win the point. It's a very common scene. You're calm, things are more or less in order, and suddenly someone throws out a line in a mocking tone, as if testing how far the limit goes. You feel the immediate urge to respond. Your body moves before your mind does. That's where everything gets decided, not in what you say, but in whether you react. Have you noticed that many provocations only exist if you pick them up? Epictetus said this with brutal clarity. If someone provokes you and you get upset, you've handed them control, not because they're strong, but because you stepped out of your place. Reclaiming your center isn't staying silent forever. It's choosing the moment. It's not answering while you're heated. It's letting the discomfort hang in the air without needing to resolve it right away. I started doing something very simple. When I felt the provocation, I didn't answer in the moment. I breathed. I changed the subject. Sometimes I left the room, not as an escape, but as a conscious retreat. Later, if it was necessary, I spoke, but from a different place. At first I felt strange, even weak. Then I understood I was training something more important than a quick comeback. I was training self-mastery. Here's a practice worth gold. Decide ahead of time that you will not respond to emotional provocations in the moment they happen. Not because you don't have an answer, but because your answer deserves a different context. That pause disarms more than any clever phrase, because when they don't get a reaction, the dynamic loses power. Some will push, some will raise the tone to force a reaction. Don't get it twisted, it's not an escalation, it's the end of a habit. And holding that active silence, that steady calm, requires something not everyone is willing to tolerate: prolonged discomfort. That's exactly where the next step is decided, because when you stop reacting, the atmosphere changes, and it doesn't always change into something comfortable right away. 7. Prepare for the awkward phase and hold it without guilt. There's a moment that almost always arrives after you set boundaries, though nobody warns you about it. It's not an open fight. It's not a slammed door. It's subtler and harder to hold. The strange silence, the tense looks, the feeling that something changed, and you still don't know whether it's for better or worse. Many people back down there, not because they're wrong, but because they can't stand the discomfort of feeling different inside their own family. I remember that stage clearly. Loose comments, lines like, "You're different, you weren't like this before, now everything bothers you." They didn't say it with open aggression, but the message was clear. You're breaking the balance we got used to. And then guilt shows up. That old guilt that pushes you to apologize for having limits, to soften what you already made clear, to step back into the comfortable role you've always had. You have to think slowly here. When you change a dynamic, the whole system resists. Not because it's unjust, but because it worked for other people. Holding the awkward phase doesn't make you a bitter old person. It makes you an adult who decided not to fade away anymore. Discomfort isn't a sign you made a mistake. Many times it's the sign that something is being reorganized. I remember a family meal where nobody quite knew how to talk to me. Everything was polite, but distant. I felt out of place too. I could have cracked a joke to lighten things up. I could have backed off a little to recover closeness quickly. I didn't. I stayed. I ate quietly when it was necessary. I spoke when I had something to say. It was awkward, but it was honest. And with time, The tone settled from a different place. The Stoics understood that not all discomfort is negative. Some discomforts are part of growth, like when your body adapts to a new rhythm or a joint starts moving again after being stiff for a long time. It hurts a little, but it's a sign something is waking up. The mistake would be numbing that process out of fear of looking bad. The tool here is internal, and it requires quiet courage. Don't apologize for legitimate boundaries. Don't over-explain. Don't justify the change. Simply hold it. If someone tells you you're different, you can nod without debating. Maybe you are. And maybe that's necessary. Real respect doesn't arrive before this test. It arrives after it. There will come a point when the tension drops. Not because you gave in, but because the new frame became clear. And when that happens, you'll notice something you can't buy and you can't demand. A different kind of treatment. More care, more restraint. Not perfect, but real. And then you'll understand that holding the discomfort wasn't the price. It was the path. If you've made it this far, you've already traveled something important. Not scattered ideas, but a process. First, reclaim your place in your own home. Then separate love from what you allow. Learn to correct without humiliating, stop over-explaining, organize access to your space, stop reacting when people bait you, and finally hold the awkwardness without guilt. None of that is theory. It's a different way of standing in front of your family and in front of yourself. I want to leave you with one last reflection, maybe the most important of all. The respect you ask for outside begins with the respect you're willing to hold inside, even when nobody celebrates it. In the second half of life, it's no longer about being liked. It's about not disappearing, not shrinking so others feel comfortable. Life is hard, yes, but you can still live it with dignity if you don't abandon your place when it's hardest to hold. My name is Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. This channel exists to walk with you as you age with sovereignty, clarity, and steadiness, not with empty comfort. If this video helped you, I invite you to subscribe, share it with someone who needs it, and leave a comment with the phrase, "I am a Stoic," along with the country you're listening from. I read every comment, and it matters to me to know what corner of the world this community of conscious Stoics is forming in, growing day by day. Next, 2 videos will appear that may interest you. Choose one, and we'll keep walking together.